I think we're moving into a really nice space where it's like the right model for the right job.
Everything gets more difficult as the model gets larger.
We're now moving into multimodal and vision. And I think vision is going to be incredibly important for organizations.
And I think it's really critical that to get value and to be able to deploy AI in a cost-effective manner in any way that makes sense, you really consider having.
You are listening to the AI with Maribel Lopez podcast, or AI with ML. If this is your first time listening, thank you for joining. The AI with Maribel Lopez podcast is brought to you by the Data for Betterment Foundation. This podcast shares the stories of the people behind the new world of data and AI. What are they creating, and why does it matter? If you like this episode, please subscribe so you can easily find the podcast again. You can find the video version of this podcast at youtube.com at AI with Maribel Lopez. You can also share your feedback and ideas with me on X, also known as Twitter, and LinkedIn. All links are in the show notes. Extended show notes, episodes, and transcripts can be found at lopezresearch.com/podcast. I hope you'll enjoy the show. Hello and welcome to the AI with Maribel Lopez program. Today I'll be speaking with Kate Soule, who is the Director of Technical Product Management for IBM's Granite products. IBM Granite is a set of third-generation AI models from IBM, and the goal was to create fit-for-purpose, open-sourced, enterprise-ready models for enterprise tasks that can range anything from RAG to coding to cybersecurity. But that was my quick take on it, and we're here to talk to Kate about her take on it. Kate, welcome to the program.
Hey, Maribel, thanks so much for having me.
So, Kate, in your own words, can you tell us more about what IBM Granite is and what the latest generation offers over what you might have done in previous generations?
Absolutely. So Granite is really designed to be kind of a core building block that enterprises can use and build on top of when building with generative AI. We have designed Granite to really focus on efficiency, focusing on smaller model sizes with the understanding that you can unlock tremendous performance gains by customizing those smaller models for tasks, allowing you to deliver, top performance at a much lower cost than if you went with a much larger model. And we're innovating, dropping updates to the Granite model family almost monthly. So there's a lot going on with Granite as the field is just moving so quickly, and we're working to keep these models up to date with what's new. So this latest release with Granite focuses on a couple of main things. First, we have vision supported. So we've moved from just having language models to now being able to perform document understanding tasks, image understanding tasks, and other tasks in the vision domain. The second main update that we have released with 3.2 is the enablement of reasoning capabilities in Granite. This is an experimental feature, and it's really designed to be kind of our entree into the broader space, but reasoning is getting a lot of traction in the field. There's lots of room to innovate here, and so we're really excited to showcase how IBM's thinking about reasoning in AI and start to bring some of those early capabilities to our customers.
Okay, I want you to clarify something because we have a mixed audience that listens to the program. Some people are more business-oriented and some people are more technical. Could you tell us what reasoning means and the importance of adding reasoning into AI models?
Absolutely. So reasoning is kind of this new venue for innovating in generative AI. And what it really gets down to is if you allow a model to generate more text at inference time when it's running a task, you can often get it to improve its performance. So that costs a little bit more because you have to pay for more tokens, the words that the models produce. But if your task is complicated and high value, that means that you can, it's often worth that cost and you can get higher performance out of it.
I think that what we've been talking about is the move to trying to focus more on something that is more accurate, that is more special purpose, that it's at the right price point, are some of the things that, I know IBM has been talking about. But just to, in your own words, what are the things enterprise buyers should prioritize when evaluating the different types of AI models for their business needs? Because we're at the point now where, it started with everybody thought there was one model, and now it seems like every week we're getting different variants of models and new models. So hard for organizations to figure out what to do? How do you talk to them about it?
Yeah, I get asked this question quite a bit, and I think a lot of us started our journey in generative AI wondering, is there going to be one model to kind of rule them all, so to speak? Are we just going to end up with this big model, thick model, and we use that one model for all things? And I think it's really critical that to get value and to be able to deploy AI in a cost-effective manner in any way that makes sense, you really consider having kind of fit for purpose models and have a toolkit that has many different types of models at your disposal. So with Granite, we're kind of designing it as one of those items in your toolkit. There's always going to be need for larger models, but we believe that smaller models, you can customize them more easily and can build kind of a library for your top use cases of things that are going to drive the most value. And we think we can help really improve the efficiency. So fit for purpose is a really important thing for consideration for those looking at their AI model strategy. I also think it's critical that when looking to deploy AI or use AI in your day to day, you understand kind of the trust and transparency of the model. So we're seeing a lot of different regulations coming through. There's different regulatory environments depending on where you live. And there's real implications for your customers, for your brand reputation, and as a whole, that all come down to, is the model going to provide trusted outputs? And is the model potentially going to violate any copyright concerns, for example, based off of how it was trained? So that really gets to that trust and transparency angle when selecting models that we think is critical if you're going to be deploying generative AI.
So let's go there for a second because I think this is going to be a real critical topic for 2025. How can buyers effectively evaluate an AI model's decision making or ensure it's aligned with their governance requirements? Because we see to keep getting more of those, and we have quite a few models as well. So, any guidance that you're giving organizations on that?
Yeah, I think there's a couple of different high level recommendations I'd make. First and foremost, make sure you understand the safety evaluations that have been run. Pretty much every model provider now is putting out reports on how their model behaves on different safety benchmarks. Those are kind of the table stakes these days in order to demonstrate that the model has at least some innate degree of safety. But even more important is having a more systems-based approach to safety. So you never want to rely solely on the individual model's what we call safety alignment, how it's been trained to handle safety, because these are, probabilistic systems that will, produce outlier responses. You want to have guardrails. So we have, for example, a series called Granite Guardian. These are guardrail models, and what they do is they sit on right in parallel with a LLM that's deployed, and they investigate the inputs going into the model and the outputs coming out of the model. And they can be used to detect if any harmful content's being produced. They can also be used to detect are any adversarial attacks that might get the model to divulge sensitive information going into the model. And you can kind of abort that flow before it even starts. So having a more systems-based approach is key. And then the last thing I would look at is, look at the documentation of the model, particularly the terms in which it's offered, whether or not it's indemnified. So IBM, for example, we publish all the details about our training data sets because we go through a very rigorous approach, making sure we have the right terms and conditions in place to use the model, the data that we're using to train models. And it's because of that rigor that we're able to actually indemnify the Granite model's use. So make sure you're familiar with the broader protections that could be in place from a model provider, because that will also help speak to their comfort and it with the systems that they've built.
We've had a lot of discussion in the industry about what data has been used to train these models and was the appropriate copyright, intellectual property rights actually taken into consideration during that. And I do wonder over the course of time, can you unwind some of those things in the other models? But knowing that you started at the start, at the outset, with that principle in mind actually really protects both IBM and its clients from some of the issues that might come down the road. Now, we talked quite a bit about small, and I thought we might just want to dig in for a second about IBM Granite and architectural choices or design principles that might differentiate it from other models in terms of how it supports enterprise readiness and performance. And I know one thing we were talking about is small, and maybe you can, for the breadth of audience, just talk a little bit about why small matters. You referenced it earlier, but to just put another point on that.
Yeah, so everything gets more difficult as the model gets larger. I mean, if you're using a hosted endpoint, it's simply just going to cost more. So maybe the complexity is the same, but it's going to cost more, both from a dollar standpoint. It also, by pure nature of size, has a longer latency. It takes longer for the model to return a response back. So that's a reduced customer experience. So size is really critical for those standpoints. And then if you're hosting the models yourselves, you need bigger hardware, more GPUs in order to run the model. That drives up your cost significantly. What IBM's really interested in is looking at the customization angle, customizing and training, doing additional training on top of, small models is much easier, much less compute intensive than doing that same exact training process on top of big models. Because we've, again, trained these models all the way from scratch, as you've mentioned, making sure that transparency is throughout, that gives you a really great starting point to further customize and kind of do this rapidly and iteratively as your business changes, as you get more data, and kind of stay current in that environment.
Okay, let's take a crystal ball and start to look ahead for a moment. When we're thinking about AI, as you mentioned, it's really evolving very rapidly. So, what do you think are some of the evaluation criteria that'll be important for either AI model selection or AI technology in the next, I was going to say several years, but at the pace we're moving, let's just call it the next year?
Yeah. I think it's all going to start to distill down to a performance per cost basis. And how flexible are you in allowing customers to choose how much they want to pay to do a different task? Because as we just talked about with reasoning, if you let a model generate more tokens, quote unquote, think longer about a task, it improves the performance, but you also have to pay more. And I really think we're going to need to get into a much more kind of dynamic market situation where you can define how much you're going to spend on a task, have the model respond. We actually started enable that. We have the first degrees of that with our Granite 3.2 model that came out, because you can turn the thinking capability on and off with a simple parameter setting that you configure as a developer. So you don't have to pay for all that reasoning if you don't need the performance. But I expect this is only going to get more fluid, and being able to have a whole kind of cost curve that emerges. And model providers are, if I use my crystal ball, I think model providers are going to be evaluated by how efficient that efficient frontier is, looking at the difference between cost and performance, not just who is the best overall number if you spend, $20 per million tokens or whatever some of the higher price points are these days on a generation task.
One of the things you mentioned earlier at the beginning was that we're now moving into multimodal and vision. And I think vision is going to be incredibly important for organizations. But tell us a little bit more about what's going on with Granite and vision.
Yeah, so I'm really excited by IBM's strategy for multimodal more broadly and vision specifically. You know, as a IBM, we obviously have a huge emphasis on enterprise tasks when we think about training these models. And so when we set out to train a vision model, I think a lot of vision models are kind of seen as toys. They were some of the first models that people really got to experience generative AI with, generating images of, cats wearing fun outfits or doing different things, right? So I think we were able to bring a really kind of pragmatic lens to vision with the release of our Granite 3.2 model, focusing on what are some of the highest value tasks, low-hanging fruit that we want to really empower our customers to be able to run with vision models. And so one of the first things we did is we focused on vision understanding. So that's image in, text out, not a text in, image out model. So we're really focused on where do we see a lot of value in tasks in the enterprise where you're having to analyze images, where you're having to analyze documents, analyze charts. And so that was kind of a key design decision in the model we created. We also specialized the model during training on the domain of documents, charts, and dashboards. So thinking about vision tasks, not from, counts how many, hands I'm holding up in this picture, or is this a picture of a cat or a dog? By being able to look at a chart and be able to ask questions about it, you be able to distill information out of poorly scanned PDFs or a picture of a receipt. Being able to take a screenshot of a dashboard that you're working on, paste it into the chatbot, and then start asking questions about it. Okay, can you tell me what my year-over-year growth was, XYZ? So we really think that this is going to be a very valuable tool, and we are excited we're able to deliver it in only 2 billion parameters. So in the grand scheme of large language models, 2 billion is pretty small. I mean, you can run this locally on your laptop if you'd like. And we have partnerships with Olama and LM Studio that make that easy. And, we're really excited to be able to create what we think is a very useful, efficient, pragmatic tool for enterprises trying to deal with data that is in the vision space.
Kate, maybe you can just spend a minute talking about the range of parameters so people can put the 2 billion into context.
Sure. So, way back in the day, early GPTs, before we even got to GPT-3.
2 years ago, way back in the day.
Forever ago, dinosaurs were roaming the earth. We had models that were quite large in the tens of millions of parameters. So that quickly escalated. We got to, models in the hundreds of millions to the early billions of parameters, low billions. And, now we have models very oftenly used between, 70 billion parameters to 400 billion parameters. And those are kind of the large language models. There are models that are even bigger, or that we suspect are even bigger, but, there's not a lot of details. Not everyone shares full details of just how big their model is. But what we see being really important is when it comes time to actually deploy these models, not just like have the model take a test and, do an evaluation. When it comes time to deploy them, models that are, 400 plus billion parameters in size are just too expensive to run. They're too slow.
Absolutely.
So something that's down more in the 2 billion parameter size to even 8 billion, you can actually get away with running. We have to compress it a little bit, but using a method called quantization, but you can get it to run on a laptop. And, models between 8 billion, and 30 billion we're seeing as really useful for kind of productive use where it's being hosted somewhere, but it's being used on a day-to-day. You can still keep your costs pretty low. So again, it's all about, like, if I think of where the future is headed, it's like, how do I have that right cost benefit trade-off and the flexibility to choose where I want to sit on that curve? Bigger models will normally perform better than smaller models, all else being equal, but I might not need that performance of, the biggest gun, so to speak. I might be able to get away with a much smaller model for what I'm trying to do.
What I love about where you've gone with AI is one of the things you mentioned, like we talked about vision before, and I think a lot of that showed up in the consumer landscape of we're going to circle an image and see if we can find, that handbag or that location, which is great for the consumer landscape. But, what do real enterprise customers need to do on a broader scale, right? So we had started maybe talking about vision with let's do computer vision on manufacturing lines to see if there was a defect. But in garden variety business, every day, people are dealing with charts and graphs and all kinds of interesting things that if you could actually vision on them, it would be fabulous. So I'm excited to hear that we've gotten to that point in models, which is very practical enterprise use case for just about any enterprise, whether they be small, medium, or large. So that's great. And I love the fact that it's not just text, because not every application we're going to want to move forward with is text. And the other part that you just brought up in terms of the different types of models, I think we're moving into a really nice space where it's like the right model for the right job. If you're trying to do drug discovery, you might need a big honkin' model, right? If you're trying to look at the dashboard chart and reason over that, that's a different model, right? So now organizations have choice. So I want to thank you for helping to create that choice. And thank you for joining the program. And I really do look forward to seeing what you build next.
Thank you so much, Maribel. And thanks for having me on the show.
Thank you for listening. Additional content can be found at lopezresearch.com/podcasts. Until next time, wishing you all the best.